welcome back to the Astro community call for the week of December 13th. To kick things off, we have some very exciting breaking news. We have a brand new themes catalog. So this is super exciting if you're a template author or theme designer. We've had these community submitted themes for a while, but we've kind of revamped these, and you now have dedicated detail pages and links, and as you can see, like information about what tools these are using. And what's really cool is that you can go to the theme submission page and submit your theme. So there's a whole form here, and it goes right to us so we can review it. And you can also share your paid theme and link out to Gumroad or your own website, and we will link users directly to that as well. So that's a super exciting thing. If you're into building themes, want to make some money, we will get it in front of people. If you submit it to us, we can put it on our site. So there's a couple premium themes up there already, and hopefully more to come. We also have this exciting little project, which is an official Houston theme for VS Code. And you can see in this slide, it's got some nice cool blues, minty greens, and soft purples. It's very glowy and fun. And there's also a live Houston in your panel, so you can interact as you type, and there are errors. He gets increasingly sad. And let's see, are we going to see the crying face? I think so. Yeah. So they will cry, and as you fix errors, they will get less and less upset. So just a fun little experiment. But yeah, if you are interested in updating the theme or making any contributions, the repository is on the link there, so definitely go check it out. Next up, we've got the pulse check for the Astro Repo. So let's take a look. Big push coming into the end of the year here. 31 out of 39 PRs being merged this week. 27 out of 37 issues closed. And one standout commit author is Ben with over 100 commits, I think, on the content schemas. So we're going to chat about that later today, but super exciting stuff. Ben's been working super hard.
Shout out to the docs team for all of the docs commits. I know that's part of this.
Nice. It's got to be your flow state from Centered app, Ben.
Oh, absolutely.
Listening to your own voice just couldn't be more soothing.
Oh, I never use the Astro Room, but I hope other people do. I just can't.
That's fair. Yeah, there's a new patch release. There are fewer announcements than, a big minor, but there are some good things that got fixed. The compiler has internally been updated to the latest version of Go, which is very exciting if you're into working on the compiler. That unlocks some awesome new stuff in Go, like fuzzing and generics and things like that. So huge shout out to Caleb for that contribution. Internally, we updated ES build as well. The Cloudflare demo and Netlify adapters are now on the latest version, which is awesome. RSS was a very exciting community contribution as well. So you can now import your posts and include your full content in your RSS feed, which is super exciting. So yeah, let's take a look at the core contributions from folks. Tons of amazing community effort here. Lots of helpful contributions. Super endearing to see, and we really appreciate all of it. Anders took the fast XML parser library we were using and significantly improved the XML we are generating. So now it is not hand rolled, it's all properly generated and sanitized. So definitely was a great PR, went super in depth on bugs and edge cases and why we should not have been doing the thing we were doing. But much better now. So thank you, Anders, for that contribution. Some more exciting RSS stuff. Ben Smith implemented the content prop. So that is included as an opt-in feature. You can include your full post content in the RSS feed. So note that this only works with Markdown, not MDX, but you can pass through the compiled content, which is pretty exciting. So, all right. Super huge shout out to Ben for that awesome PR. Ido helped spot an unnecessary, premature optimization here. So the astro.slots.render doesn't use a cache anymore, which unlocks some possibilities for dynamic stuff. Wulin Sheng took a shot at helping Erica on her mission for better errors by fixing a bug reported in the pre-release with the error overlay, which we'll be sharing more on soon. But yeah, this was a really great feature that he caught a fix. Jeffrey here made a small but powerful addition to the Astro Redirects API so that all error codes from 301 to 307 are now supported. Martin came in and updated Magic String to the latest version. This is used internally in a lot of places, a bunch of Vite and rollup plugins. It's a really great tool. So that is a huge update. Thank you very much. And Juan has done some more amazing work on the Vercel integration, supporting node fetch and new native fetch in Node 18. So hopefully we will get to a world soon where every version of Node that is supported has fetch built in. But unfortunately, node fetch is still needed for now. So now it works no matter what environment you're using. Awesome. We've got some support squad updates from Peter.
Yeah, I just want to say a big shout out to everyone who's been stepping in the past week or so. Right, few of them, particular this week. We've got TC, right, who's recently became a maintainer last week, who's just absolutely been crushing it in the support squad. Happy Dev and Wassfila, who is again new to the server, but his contributions recently has just been fantastic, and it's great to see the conversations going. It's been Raspberry Pi Day in the off channel as well, which is great to see. But yeah, so big shout out to these three this week. Thank you very much for your contributions, guys. Greatly appreciated. Yay!
Winter themed fuzzy. I love it.
I've got a boatload.
That's super fun. Yeah, some exciting stuff going on in the docs repo as well. I can walk through it, or Sarah, Chris might be here to add some color
Yeah,
as
I
well.
click it.
Hey.
As we can see, our prolific committer Ben doesn't just stick to the Astro repo. He's also filling up our bar charts here. Oh wow, those monocles.
I have a virus.
Yeah, Ben has been very tolerantly tolerating me and Sarah as we carefully edit all the details in this exciting guide for the upcoming feature of Collections API, which a lot of people may not yet be familiar with, but it's going to be a really cool feature and coming soon.
Awesome. Still want to shout out the search stats.
Yeah.
So we've kind of been auditing this.
This is always useful if anyone ever feels like spending some time looking at our search. This is a good issue. It's pinned, and you can just post and let us know stuff. That's always helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, we have some
new
translation.
Yeah. So long-time Astro followers may know we have this clever GitHub issue which auto updates after every commit in the docs repo to track what's been translated, what hasn't been translated, what what needs updating. And I noticed late last week that it hasn't been working for a couple of weeks. So I fixed that, but as a part of that, I also thought it would be fun to try out some new things. So we now have these little emoji-powered progress bars that will show us how many of those pages a little more visually and get a quick glance overview, especially now we have so many pages. When we first launched this dashboard, we had like maybe 40 pages max, probably less actually, showing up. But we're upwards of 80 now, so there's a lot to keep track of. So this hopefully help you get a quick overview of what's going on.
Nice.
And this is an awesome contribution. Neil's community member and came in, and this is their first ever. I think Sarah will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think first ever open source contribution full stop, and it's a whole guide to how to connect your Astro site to a headless WordPress setup. So like that's incredible. It was a lot of work, and so now if anyone's ever wondered like how you do that, we have this beautiful guide in Docs that'll walk you through all the steps you need to hook up your WordPress REST API and get a site going.
That's amazing. Chris, have you heard any awesome talks on contributing to the docs recently?
I may have done, yeah. So Sarah, very own Sarah, Docs lead here, gave a great talk last Friday. Sarah, is that right? I've already lost track of time, but I think it was Friday. At Write the Docs Australia, although remotely by video. And this is these cool, what do you call them? Sketch notes?
Yeah.
Sketch notes. Yeah. So like they had someone at the conference was taking notes for every talk and posted these for Sarah's, showing all the thought and care she puts into like how you build docs when you have this amazing group of community contributors that are taking part. So if you're interested, I don't know if the public link's up yet, but I think it'll go out soon. We'll be sure to share it. And you can hear Sarah explain how she gets it all done in the amazing way she does. So it was really good to hear.
Spreading the gospel of not worse than what we had before.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Twitter chat about not worse than what we had before after the talk. So I think it's a popular one.
Definitely is. Amazing. Yeah, this is some of that Twitter love. It is a transformative way to think about things. So I really love it. And seems like lots of other people did too. So great work, Sarah. Awesome. I think that's it for this portion of the call. We're going to move on to the very exciting blank screen. The content collections RFC. So,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome. Ben, you have been taking on this Herculean effort of getting the contents collections, content schemas. I don't know what we're calling it. Content collections.
It is now Content Collections. That's the name of the docs page. It's the name of the feature. It's the name of everything. Because schemas are just an optional way to enforce types in your collection. So the real star of the show is like you put your content into folders. We give you a nice way to query for those folders and filter by subdirectories and all of that. So other than the rename of the title, the content is pretty much the same as the last week or so that we've taken a look at this. I'm actually surprised October 3rd is when we started this. My God. But since then, I guess a lot has changed. The only last things to, sorry.
Let's just take it from the top. Give a bit of a summary.
Oh,
What
man.
the goal is here. If anybody hasn't is joining us for the first time, let's chat about this because I think we're gonna go through the whole thing today. So
Yeah, once more with feeling. Okay. So I will say on the outset here that a lot has been refined over the past months of async feedback we've gotten on the thread, and we are working to hopefully get consensus today on the APIs as described in this document and now on our documentation preview, and hope for an experimental release within the coming week. So the summary of what's going on here is there will be a new reserved directory in Astro where you can manage all of your content. It will have some helper functions to query from that directory, and you will have collections, which are directories within source content to structure all of your related Markdown and MDX files, and a way to configure schemas in order to set the types of your front matter and enforce them and throw error messages when you have bad front matter in your Markdown, so that when you create new documents, you make sure you fill everything out correctly, and you can get some nice type safety in your editor. And the last thing is about metadata thrown in .astro. In the release preview, it'll actually just be thrown in a types file, but pretty much the same concept. We'll generate some types for you based on your schemas. That's the gist of it. So the goals, it's about the landing pages, it's about generating routes, and it's about actually putting up guardrails so that you get good error messages to correct front matter when it's malformed, as worded there. And out of scope, it's for Markdown MDX right now, but we see a future where it could include, structuring your JSON, your YAML, your CSV files, other types that you might want a schema for. So right now, we are focusing on Markdown MDX. There's an example right here of how you might have a set of blog posts that you put into a blog collection. That's the blog folder inside of content. And you will use get collection in order to get everything out of that folder. So we see here, get the blog collection, and you'll get some autocomplete for collections that exist. And you can also have a filter function for a little convenience to say, I only want to get ones that have status of draft in the front matter. So data is front matter in this example. And if you know exactly what document you want, you basically just want to import it, but run it through the schema checker. You can use get entry to get a specific file out of that collection folder. And then when you have that result, it's going to be an array coming out of that collection there. And you can map those out, get the slug out of it. You can take the title out of your front matter. You might get a publish date that's an actual date object. You can see here using 2 ISO string and a bunch of other helpers. And all of that is made possible by schemas, which are explained just below this, where in our blog, we want to make sure that we have a title. And we see slug is in there, but to be honest, we generate a slug for you. You probably don't need that unless you're customizing the slug. But we also have images, maybe some tags, which is an array of strings, and a publish date where you can use a fancy transform function to take a regular old string into some other object that you want to use, in this case, a date object. And that is all being powered by Zod, which is being imported with that Z helper coming straight from the Astro content directory. So a lot of things going on that combine into a whole, which is just, I want schemas, I want collections. And we'll break it down just below this.
Nice.
Trucking along. So the motivation, first off, front matter is hard to debug when you have authored everything. The way it works today, you're using Astro Glob to get all of the entries out of a directory, using a glob pattern to maybe get a blog folder out of your source. And whatever comes back is just going to be whatever we parsed out of the front matter YAML. Who cares what it is? You can do a typecast as I'm generating here to say, I know it's going to be a title string and I trust that I did it right. But of course, you might have done it wrong. There's no guarantee that you wrote your front matter correctly. You're just kind of, telling a lie to your editor that, yes, it's going to be right. So if you happen to miss a title in one of your posts and you're running like an extension function on it to uppercase, you might go through the flow of, where did I call to uppercase? Oh, it's on the landing page. Probably the title property. It's missing a title. I need to console log it. Oh, it's post number 1149. Like, it's a lot when you run into those runtime issues where you're not actually checking your front matter. You're just kind of hoping it's right. So what we want to do is give you a readable error to say, here's the file where it went wrong. Here's the property that was missing. Title is required. You will get that full error message pointing to the exact line of the front matter that you need to correct if it's a wrong type or if it's missing. And then you can go there and correct it straight away. So as you write more blog posts, as you scale whatever content you have, you're not worried about missing properties. It's going to check it for you. So the next problem this is addressing, importing globs of front matter can be slow depending on the context. So if you are just trying to make a landing page, when you use a regular Astro glob, you're globbing and rendering all of the markdown and MDX files in that folder, when you really might just need a slug and the front matter. You don't need to render out all of the markdown and remark plugins that you have just to generate a landing page. So this solution is kind of a shortcut where instead of rendering all of your posts through the remark pipeline, thousands of posts deep maybe, it's just going to parse out the front matter and give you that result with the generated ID and slug. And from there, you can render the full post contents later if you actually need to. But if you never find that need, then you get a big performance win in your dev server, which should improve on an issue that I linked there about how it can slow down the dev server if you're building like a footer with thousands of pages. And it needs to regenerate that footer every time you save a file. Now it's just going to regenerate some front matter, so it should feel a lot snappier, which is great. So yeah, those are the general problems that we're solving here. Also, Nate, let me know if there's questions in the chat that I should stop for. I don't see any right now, except for, data transformation. Yes, this is something you would set up yourself, and that will be explained in the schema section of this post here. We have been talking about templates in order to get you a nice getting started guide, but right now it'll just be down to good documentation and a good example project so that you can set it up. But yeah, the API breakdown, you got a content folder, it's where the stuff goes. You have an Astro cache directory, that's where our generated types go. You are free to commit this to your Git repo using, just Git practices. If you wanted to like run Astro check in your pipeline, that's something that we do in order to make sure our types pass before we actually build the website. If you want to push it up, that's totally fine. It's actually something we're doing. But if you want to put it in your Git ignore, that's totally fine too. It's up to you. But it will go in the base of your project directory. And the big one that you're going to be interacting with a lot is this Astro content. This is a fancy prefix that we're adding to sort of establish this Astroverse of helper functions based on generated types. So based on your project, we're generating utilities. And that's what Astro content is doing here, where it understands your content, it's generating types from your content, and it's giving you this fancy module in order to retrieve that content with type safety. So we've used whatever name we wanted to. We landed on Astro content because it mirrors how Node's doing things. And it also feels like, yeah, this is generated. This is not something I've installed from NPM. It's something special. So we're hoping to use this prefix for maybe other modules in the future. But for now, Astro content. So yeah, a lot of babble there. The main thing, let's get into actually building a website. So creating a collection, you just make a folder and you're off to the races. There's no JavaScript required in order to create a collection. You just make the folder and now it is queryable. The only stipulation, of course, the front matter will be of type any until you actually say what the type is. So you're allowed to query for it. You can use it like Astro Glob if that's your thing. It should make migration very smooth. But as soon as you want to add types, you'll go to that adding a schema section. But I also mentioned here nested directories should cover this one because people are going to ask, can I put a collection in a collection? The answer is no. But you can put nested directories inside of a collection. What's the difference there? Well, it mainly comes down to if you are using a schema to define your front matter types, it's going to apply to all the nested directories inside of that collection. So you can define the type of docs, but the type of docs/en is going to inherit from that parent collection. So think of directories as a way to just like organize your thoughts, put things where you want them to go so you can easily find them. But if you want to add type safety and such, you're going to need to make a new top level collection and move it around a little. That's just mirroring our like database comparison. Oh yeah?
What's the reason for that decision?
Because we're treating this, the analogy we're using is a database or a content modeling system where everything is considered one level deep, and content models don't inherit from other content models. They're distinct entities. So to make sure that you're not like defining a schema that's nested that overrides another schema, we're just treating them all at the top level directory and taking it from there. It felt like the safest call to make while scoping out the RFC. Content modeling. I don't know what you're talking about. Responding to Nate's comment there. But yeah, thanks for the question, Matthew. It is something that I expect to be asked, and we'll feel out user needs through the experimental release. But through initial findings, it feels pretty good, even refactoring our own docs.astro.build to use content collections. So pretty excited. But yeah, let's get to adding a schema. We've been talking about Zod. We've been dancing around it. What does it mean? So if you're creating a schema, it means you know the shape of your front matter. You want to type check it. You actually want to fail if something is missing. So to do that, you would create a config file inside of your source content directory. And this is where you'll configure all of the collections that you have and any collection you want to configure. You don't have to configure all of them. You can just configure the ones that you're ready to configure. So here, say, I want to make sure my blog has the right shape. I can use the define collection helper in order to create a schema and make sure that schema is the right shape. I'm not doing anything weird. You can think of that like the define config helper that we give you in Astro config today. It just tells you all the properties available without you having to import types. But yeah, you can create a schema. You can use Zod in order to define each type within that schema. And we wrote a really nice cheat sheet that will be going on our docs page for like creating strings, booleans, enums, arrays, all of the questions that you might have when you're initially enforcing your front matter. But if you just stick to like string, number, and boolean, it's just like TypeScript, just with the word Z in front of it, pretty much. The only like small nuance is like array wraps around string, kind of like the capital array helper, but specifics. If you go to the Zod documentation, we support all of the features that Zod includes, including all the way down to like using transforms and fancy async functions if you want to go crazy. But yeah, that's the gist of what it is. And we also, you export a collections object, I should mention, and that defines all of the collections that are in the directory. But yeah, right there. Like if you have a dash in the name, make sure you put the dash also here. We're not going to like transform a camel case to dash case. What is that called? Snake case? It's not snake.
Kebab case. Yeah.
Kebab case. That's what it is.
The one. It's
Good
something
name.
delicious.
Something delicious.
So this is a big change, right, from an earlier version of this RFC, that there's a single config file.
Yes.
Okay.
And yeah, previously you did config inside of each collection directory, and the feedback on that was I want my collections to be just about the content. Like I'm handing this off to copywriters. They don't want to see a bunch of JavaScript floating around. They just want to put Markdown in this folder and not worry about it. So to keep that out of the way and also make it easier to like share schemas between multiple collections, we just did one big file. And you can import anything you want into this file. Like if you have Zod types from an NPM package or some other directory, you can just funnel them all into here. Just make sure you have that collections export and you're good to go. You can organize your code how you'd like.
Nice.
But yeah, there's also a little defensive Zod up there. We've talked about Zod a lot, and I feel like we are moving forward with it. But to explain, Zod gives you some things TypeScript doesn't. One of them is letting you specify a default type with .default. You might have a bunch of consts floating around your project, and instead of doing null checks all over the place, you just want to set a default value for all your files. So it's like, yeah, you can put a language override, but by default, it's going to be English. And you don't have to worry about null checks. It will just set it for you using .default. And there's also regexes for URLs and emails if you wanted to add some more information. There's also that transform function I mentioned earlier to turn one front matter object into something else, like parsing it to a date, very common use case. But that is kind of the tip of the iceberg with Zod if you want to go deep on it. And just checking the chat here.
Somewhat unrelated. We were chatting about images.
I see.
Being relative.
Yeah, okay. If you wanted to put like images inside the content directory or other resources. Yeah. So right now there is a warning that tells you you shouldn't put them here. Consider putting them somewhere else in case that support is removed. But you can technically put anything you want in there with a relative import because honestly, it's a lot of work to prevent that. So we just let it kind of work if you wanted to put styles side by side. But I did hear some pushback from other core members saying, no, we shouldn't allow anything in the content directory. If we do that approach, we should probably introduce the same underscore convention that we have in source pages, because it's a similar use case of like everything in content is hot. Like it could be read by Astro. So if you want to avoid having it be read by Astro, put it in like an underscore directory so you can co-locate it. So I think that's what we'll move towards is like underscores for non-content inside of content, but otherwise probably don't put it here.
What is content in that? I guess it's a little. I understand limitations about not wanting to read image files, but I definitely do see the use case of wanting to, you're writing a blog post, you want to put the images of that blog post aside the markdown. It seems to me the images kind of are content, or I don't know what's the story around that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Because the thinking was like, if you make that argument for images, you could also make it for like styles and scripts that you load into your MDX. And then it's questioning like, oh, well, is a CSS file content? Not really. But is a PNG content? Sure. So now you can relative import that. And it's like, I feel like content is limited to Markdown and MDX right now. And if more file types are added, then they should also be like enforceable with the schema or some other concept that applies to collections. JSON files, YAML files, CSVs, those are ones that we were working towards. And PNGs maybe in order to include alt text, although we hadn't really scoped that out. So I'm curious how you feel about underscores as a convention for that, or if that doesn't feel right.
I mean, it feels fine to me. I'm more thinking about whether this is a story we need to solve for at this time. Like, didn't the one that your example in that branch, doesn't it have a CSS file?
It actually does, yeah. Because I realized, oh, this just works because we ignore anything that is not MD or MDX. But the worry is, what if someday PNGs are now treated as a special thing, and it's a breaking change that now PNGs can like have alt text defined in the schema? So we thought, oh, maybe we should have introduced the underscore trend sooner. So it's like, if you don't want it to be read as content to just future-proof more file types we may add, just don't allow anything that's not in the allowed file extension list. It's a tough rope to walk, because like CSS files, we would never treat those as content, I don't think. But what if we allow custom file types, and you can like read any file type you want and customize a loader? I'm not sure what the future holds, so I'm just trying to be cautious, I guess.
Yeah, this is, I think, a pretty important thing to solve for. I think the underscore idea is maybe a good stopgap. I mean, I definitely understand your concern, but I think people are almost definitely going to want to co-locate, assuming they're using this for like blog posts and stuff. So, you could do underscore as the what we say there, and that's an easy enough thing just to always ignore. Um, yes, so some story around that. I'm not sure what it would be, but um, some solution for like groupings, I guess, of content where like one thing is the quote unquote content and the other stuff is like, I don't know, attachments, or I don't know what you want to call those, but
Mhm.
files that are used by the content. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Mhm.
it's something to think through.
Yeah, I know both data and assets have come up as names for things that are like used by content but not standalone content. And that has not been solved yet, whether it should be like another concept or if we should just keep adding more file extensions to content. So yeah, based on that uncertainty, I think adding underscores to this RFC makes a lot of sense to make sure that that's covered. All it does is log a warning message saying probably don't do this, because like preventing a relative import is like more work than it needs to be. I guess the worst case, we could just like crawl the directory, see if he did something, and then throw if we don't like a warning. I don't know. But yeah, I think underscores.
I think we can kind of keep going through the RFC, but yeah, I definitely think something about that, like co-locating images. I think specifically like relative images in Markdown is a thing we don't support right now. So
Yeah.
maybe another use case to think about, but I don't want it to block us actually getting through the whole doc. So let's circle back to this if that's cool.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks for the input, y'all.
Awesome. So we've got collections. These will be enforced, and you'll actually get the correct types. And nested directories, you'll get basically everything.
Yes. So when you call get collection, you will get all the nested directories as a flat list. And if you want to filter by a specific directory or subdirectory, you can use the filter that I mentioned earlier to like check, does the ID start with en/? Okay, now it's the en folder, and I'm just going to grab those. So that's what you would do to grab a nested collection. We have an example on our running docs draft. But yeah, everything's a flat array, which should be helpful for generating pages, which is part of the design. And also what this example shows here, where you might have docs that are subdivided by language, and you just want to take all those docs and all those languages and map them to pages on your site. And the way you do that is you can create a dynamic route with the triple dot in there to make sure that any nested level will be supported, like supporting nested en/whatever. Then you just get the collection, you map each entry to that slug parameter, and you're done. You have created routes for all of the content directories. So if you're moving any content out of pages for the benefits we've been talking about, this is the way to generate URLs from them once you've enforced all that front matter stuff. And what else? Rendered contents is a separate RFC. We can go through that, but yeah, I'm not sure if we're going until 3 p.m. or the next 16 minutes, Nate.
Yeah, 16 minutes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll jump over there. That one will be a lot quicker. The only thing to go over are Matthew's recent changes that are just changing the under the hood implementation, but it's going to feel the same to use. But the last things in here, generated types go in .astro. The appendix has a sample of that if you're really curious what the types file looks like. Syncing the directory, we will have a, I've actually changed, I should really update this, where it says the Astro check command, but it should say Astro sync, which will be based on SvelteKit sync, which is just a command to generate types, and that's it. So if you just want to get going with the Astro content and you don't want to do a full production build, that would be the quick command to do that. And we'll have a little API reference for you. But yeah, exposing Z. Z is from Astro content. You use it how you'd expect, and it will be coming from Astro, but code split to a separate module so that we don't accidentally ship it in your prod deploys, unless you really do import it. And the other stuff will also come from Astro content, and these will be a Vite virtual module to define that behavior, and some generated types to make sure they give you type checking. And the rest of this is just making sure it's ready to go and you know how to use it. So testing strategy, a lot of this stuff has already been checked off except for some end-to-end tests. And we're just going to make sure it builds, it runs, it generates types that are valid according to Astro check. And yeah, drawbacks. Forgot about drawbacks. So Zod has a learning curve, of course. And I think our running docs draft is doing a really good job of addressing this. But we feel that Zod has a lot of runtime benefits for like setting defaults, transforms, other things that I've mentioned. So using it as like the recommended baseline seems like a really good way to go for an initial launch. And there is some magic involved with Astro content, and generating types. This is the first time Astro has ever generated types for your project. So that's kind of a brave new world. So at least calling it out as like, yeah, Astro's doing some fun new things inspired by other frameworks. So if we like it, then let's keep going. What else? Alternatives. Mentioned some alternatives to Zod, mostly displaced at this point. Like using a JSON-based schema format would require a lot of extra documentation on our part and zero type checking in your editor if you're using JSON or YAML, which makes it tough. But at least calling out content layer since it does use an approach in that direction. Yeah, collections versus globs. Collections are, of course, pro and con. The pro is that collections are very simple and easy to get going with, and you can use the filter function to get nested directories, so that's still working. But if you wanted to glob across multiple collections, you got to make multiple get collection calls. You can't do a magic like star get everything the way you might have done with Astro Glob. And that's mostly for the type checking story, where you want to make sure when you get that array of blog posts, they all have the same front matter. So if we let you glob across everything, the types would get very muddy very quickly. So it's up to you to kind of match those up with multiple get collection calls. But at least calling out content layer again, since they do globbing in order to define a schema, but we've gone with a more structured sort of database table format where it's one collection, one schema, and a directory is how you define that. So adoption strategy, this will be an experimental flag within the coming week if plans pan out. And in Astro 2.0 baselined when that release comes out. Won't promise when Astro 2.0 is, but it is slated for the coming months. So get ready for that. This will be the first preview of what's to come. But yeah, what else is in here? All the stuff we planned for docs, a lot of it has been done, and some of it still yet to do, like telling people use AstroGlob to start using this new standard when it's not experimental. But for now, it's just going to be one big page about content, and you'll get to read all about it. And that's it. So should probably update the unresolved questions since they have been resolved. And that is a big old sample of type output if you care. Enjoy.
Awesome. Cool. Are there any questions for Ben?
This is really awesome. I think just like next steps, Ben. I think we've been sitting with this one for a while. We certainly could push to accept the RFC if that's what you want to do. That's also not blocking, I don't think, an experimental release with a flag. So it's certainly something we could do. Is the plan to move forward with that experimental release either way?
Yes.
Okay.
Reading through the chat and understanding feelings, there should be an answer to relative files. Not detailed in the document, but I think like if we accept, there should be a contingency that we warn about using relative files somewhere in the RFC. It's actually in our docs preview right now, since it is like, it's in code, but not in here. But the consensus I'm hearing is that we should prevent relative imports, give you a warning, and then support it as the user need comes in. And that's kind of it. So with that contingency, I'm curious if we can move to consensus.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that. I think definitely disallowing relative would be a good thing. So Seeing lots of thumbs up in the chat. The way we usually do this is voting members of the core team and technical steering committee. If there's any objections to this or concerns from the community, we'll give you a bit of an opportunity to raise those now. Otherwise, we will move forward with consensus. So are there any objections?
I do not object. I think as it is in a really good place, and I think stuff like images, like we definitely should do that. We don't need to block RFC. It's still behind a flag, so yeah, it'd be great to get that in my opinion, when we release it with the flag, when we release the next minor. That way we just no one starts doing that, and then we feel like we shouldn't break it. Not to influence a decision essentially, but otherwise, I think everything else that I've seen people chatting about are things that we could implement down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a question. So that seems like consensus has been reached on that. Is this tied to the render entry? Render content proposal.
It is tied to it, yes.
Okay.
We can run through this one. I won't fully speed run since we do have a little time to go through all of this stuff. And I'll also hand off to Matthew for the detailed design to explain some changes that were made there. But the general thing to go over here is that render content is the way that you would render the results coming out of all of those magical schemas. So we kind of left you halfway through a demo in the previous one. You can use get collection to generate some pages on your site, but how do you render that post on the page? Well, you can use params to map out the URL. And as long as you pass that entry as props, you can retrieve it and run it through this render entry helper to get an actual content component that you can use on your page. And to clarify, render entry is going to run it through the actual remark and rehype pipeline. So it's going to take that MDX file, turn it into an MDX component, and also inject the styles and scripts for that component on the page if there are any. And that kind of leads into the motivation for this, where you wanted that landing page we talked about earlier, but you don't want to inject resources unexpectedly. So here's kind of a lead-in. You're generating that landing page. You're using Astro Glob in order to do it. I'm actually kind of walking you through this very slowly with import metaglob first, where it's like, yeah, you can import everything lazily, or you can use eager in order to resolve all those modules and inject anything those modules might depend on. And the way Astro Glob works is it's a very thin wrapper around Vite that just maps it out to the values, so you don't have to map that to an array yourself. But otherwise, it's just an eager call under the hood. So when you import all your blog posts, yeah, you're going to get all the front matter. You're going to get some juicy content components that you can use. But going through here, if you scroll down a little bit, we will see what happens where, oh man, I went too slow through this. Now let's go. I really told a story with this one. I remember writing this at like midnight. Anyways, so yeah. Well, you can scroll up a little bit. We do comment on how, like, you import something into one of these documents. Say we import the Comic Sans file into one of the MDX documents across the thousands of pages that we're globbing. What will happen is when you generate routes, you're going to Comic Sans every route on your site just because there was one bad actor. Nothing can escape the Comic Sans plague. So how do you kind of quarantine those resources to only be used on the pages that actually need those styles and scripts? This is where render entry comes in, where you can do get collection to get all of the routes and generate URLs from them. But when you pass that individual entry to the page you're trying to use, it will just render and use the resources for that one entry being used on the page. So instead of injecting all the CSS across 1,000 blog entries, it will just inject the one that is being called with this render entry call. You can see there are no resources, and you can use that fun Comic Sans override where it's actually using it on that horrible blog post. So yeah, I will start with the API reference here. So it's just a single function. That's all this RFC covers. It is going to take in the results of a get entry or get collection call. So you pass in the full entry, or you can just pass in the ID and collection as object properties. If those are the only 2 bits of information you have, that option's available to you. But we're going to show in our documentation, just take the whole entry and slap it into this function. It's easier. And it will return actually more than just a content component. That's explained later in the document, but I did not update that little reference there. But the usage breakdown, you get an entry, you render it. You can also pass in the ID and collection individually if you happen to do some destructuring and you want to keep them destructured. That can be your opinion. Oh my God, there have been so many changes. Just give me this one, Nate. Just
Astro
let me
content.
rest.
Okay, yeah, there's
Just
no...
let me rest.
Nothing. I didn't highlight anything. You're good. Keep going.
You're right. You're right. That is very true. And there it is. I didn't catch all of them. The problem is .astro is also a file extension, so
right.
The regex didn't work. Dang it. But yeah, this was an addition because I realized we're not giving you the full feature set that you got from Glob, and there are some properties that rely on rendering the content in order to get the result. Those 2 things are the headings property, which is all of the headings in a document. You have to render it to know the headings. And also injected front matter, which is a fun feature we have where you can inject front matter from your Remark plugins. So naturally, we have to run Remark in order to inject that properly. So those are both available as separate object properties on render entry alongside the content component. You can also get access to these 2 things. And the important stipulation there is that no, it's not going to inject the styles by accident if you're just getting headings and injected front matter. It will only inject styles and scripts when the content component is used. So if you just want to get the headings and you don't want to accidentally render the page, you can just call render entry, get the headings, and not use the content component. So no worries about that. If I know there was a question on the issue notes that I wanted to address. But yeah, those are the features of Astro content. And now we get into like the nitty gritty of actually implementing this thing. And thanks for highlighting. That is how you would use it. You can do an await call. It works fine. You can just map them over and call render entry.
This doesn't inject the styles?
This would not inject the styles. It will only inject when the content component is used.
How in the world are we doing that?
Well, I'll hand it off to Matthew to explain this crazy code block.
Okay. Yeah. So what's...
I can also explain it, but...
Yeah, essentially anything inside the content folder, if I remember correctly, anything inside the content folder gets built differently. It gets imported with a special flag that when we do the Vite build, we build those kind of as separate files, and then whenever we go to render, what happens is that, since an Astro template is essentially a static thing, we know what components you use in a template. Therefore, we know what components are actually do get used. And if the component is used, it kind of signals to the render that this thing contains head content, and we await everything that needs to append to the head before we actually start sending out the HTML. That's kind of the explanation for it. But it's really the details is what there's this special comment syntax that we have a Vite plugin for. And anything to use that, it kind of walks up the dependency graph and marks the page as needing to wait, just to wait to see if a content exists. So that's yeah. So the idea is that this is kind of implemented in such a way that we'll be able to support like head propagation in the future. This does not mean we don't have head propagation right now, but if we want to create an RFC for that, we could, in theory, kind of the plumbing is there, that we could do that without a huge lift now.
Very cool.
Yeah, Awesome stuff.
It's possible that we can make it happen in Astro Glob. I don't know if you talked about that here, but it is possible that we could make that work with Astro Glob. Or I'm not sure if we should do that. We'll have to talk. But there are downsides because by making those files dynamic, that means that they are not going to get bundled together because they need to be separate because we only want to add them when they're actually used. So if you wind up like globbing your, your pages folder or something, it would essentially remove bundling of CSS, which is not something you actually want. So
yeah.
That's why Astro Glob doesn't do it.
Yeah, for those who know about manual chunks in Vite, we are splitting out each resource from an MDX file into its own separate chunk, because that's the only way that you can, lazily load it and make sure that we only inject it where needed. So you are losing style bundling, but render entry is a special function for a special directory, so introducing a new standard just through this felt pretty safe. And it adds a bunch of benefits that we've listed of actually injecting what's needed. So, yeah, there aren't as many drawbacks to this one. I saw we kind of speed ran through it, but what even was here? So, yeah, we talked about Astro Glob keeping the scope down because this does do some different things with bundling, but what else? Just the design of render entry. It is another function that wraps around the result of a get collection. It was pretty easy to document, but there have been some questions about can render now be an extension function on every entry instead of render entry being a separate thing. And that is actually a possibility that we can do now. But I left render entry implemented as it is today to accept the RFC as is, since I don't think it's like a huge change or lift if we do want to shift that API for an experimental release.
Nice. Yeah, recognizing that we're at time and content collections has been accepted as an RFC. Obviously, 8 minutes is not a lot of time to talk about render content. So maybe we can revisit this. It's definitely not blocking the acceptance of this or the experimental release. So is that cool if we revisit render content in the future? Everyone okay with that?
Well, I mean, we can't. Can we merge? It's part of the same PR though, right? So I don't think we can merge.
It's the same thing.
Without...
Okay. Then this is like a implementation detail more of content collections.
Yes.
Or we could just try to do a consensus right now.
Gotcha. That works for me. Are there any objections to this render content RFC? We did go through it quite quickly, but much of it is internal changes. Sweet. Seeing lots of ship-its in the chat.
If this doesn't include the Comic Sans change, then I don't know if we can merge this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I stripped Comic Sans out of the example project, so no worries there.
Extremely helpful objection, Tony. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hadn't considered that.
Okay, great. Are there any serious objections? Cool. Thank you all very much. Congratulations, Ben. Content collections has been accepted, as well as render content.
I can finally sleep. Oh my god.
Party Houston. Let's go.
Party
All right.
Houston in the chat.
Well, thank you all for joining. This was an awesome call. Keep an eye out for render.
Blah, blah, blah. Keep an eye out for content collections. Experimental release coming soon. So super exciting. Great work, Ben. Thanks, y'all.
Nice work, Ben.
Fantastic
so
work,
much.
Ben. Seriously. Smashed it.
Appreciate it. Y'all have been super responsive to everything going on, so thanks. Solved all the things. I love it. All right. See y'all later.